Nobody at the wedding rehearsal noticed the way Adrian Hale froze when the doors of the grand hall slid open. 1 second he was standing beside his elegant fiancée, rehearsing his vows for the biggest day of his life, and the next, his entire world shifted as if someone had quietly rearranged the past. He blinked twice, unsure if he was imagining the figure at the entrance. But no, the familiar posture, the calm confidence, the quiet grace. It was her. The one woman he had never fully let go of, no matter how much time had passed. And she wasn't alone. 2 children walked beside her, mirrors of each other, little hands holding rolled papers and sketchbooks, their curious eyes scanning the room as if they belonged there. Adrian's heartbeat stumbled. His fiancée continued speaking to the decorators, unaware of the silent earthquake inside him. The woman stepping into the hall wasn't just a stranger. She was the architect hired last minute to redesign the wedding venue. She was also the same woman he had once planned a future with, until fate pulled them apart with a force neither of them understood. And now she was returning, not as a memory, not as a regret, but as a mother of twins who carried a resemblance Adrian couldn't ignore. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening as questions he had buried years ago clawed their way back to the surface. Why was she here? Why now? And why did the sight of those children make his chest feel like it was being pulled in two? Adrian didn't remember moving his feet, yet somehow he found himself standing closer to her, close enough to hear the soft whisper of her breath as she examined the floral arrangements. She sensed him before she turned, her shoulders tightening the way they always had when she braced herself for something she didn't want to face. And when her eyes finally met his, the years between them folded in an instant. No anger. No welcome. Just a quiet strength that told him she had rebuilt herself from pieces he once left scattered. Liana, he breathed, her name slipping out like a memory aching to be spoken again. She offered a polite smile, the kind given to someone she used to know but no longer needed. Mr. Hale, she corrected gently, her voice calm, steady. I'm here to finalize the structural adjustments. But Adrian wasn't listening to her professionalism. His attention drifted to the twins beside her, same age, same curious gaze. One pointed at the chandelier, imagining how it was built, while the other traced invisible lines in the air, like he saw the world in shapes and designs. Adrian's chest tightened. Liana always saw beauty in structures, and these children seemed to carry that same spark. He wanted to ask. Needed to ask. But before he could, Liana spoke quietly as if reading his thoughts. Don't, she said softly. Not here. Her calm tone shook him more than any confrontation could. And as she turned away, guiding the twins through the hall, Adrian felt something unfamiliar rising inside him. A fear that this moment wasn't an accident, but a truth coming to claim him. Adrian couldn't focus on anything after she walked away. The hall felt louder, brighter, almost distorted, while his thoughts thrashed like waves in a storm. His fiancée called his name twice before he finally turned toward her, offering a weak excuse about feeling lightheaded. But the truth was clearer than ever. Liana's presence had shaken more than his calm. It had shaken the entire foundation of the life he believed he had built. Unable to bear the uncertainty pressing on his chest, he slipped out of the hall and followed the sound of small voices down a quiet corridor. He found the twins seated on the floor near the window, sketchbooks open, completely engrossed in their drawings. One was outlining a bridge with surprising precision, while the other shaded the structure with gentle patience. It was unreal. They had her talent, her imagination, but something else too. Something painfully familiar. Adrian crouched beside them, trying to steady his breath. Those are impressive, he said softly. Both boys looked up, their matching eyes bright and curious. Mom teaches us, one replied proudly. She says buildings are like people, they need strong support so they don't fall. That simple sentence hit him harder than any accusation. Liana had always believed that. She used to tell him he needed support too, but back then he hadn't known how to let anyone in. Before he could ask more, Liana appeared at the end of the hall, her expression calm, but her eyes carrying a warning he understood instantly. She stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. Adrian, please don't make this harder than it already is. And in that moment he realized she wasn't avoiding him out of anger, she was protecting something far more fragile. Something he should have never lost. Adrian followed her to the courtyard, unable to ignore the weight pressing against his ribs. The evening light painted gold across the stone walls, and Liana stood beneath it like someone carved from memory and strength. She didn't speak at first. She simply waited, as if giving him a chance to gather courage he'd never had enough of when she needed it most. And that silence felt heavier than any words she could have thrown at him. Liana? Are they? She closed her eyes, a quiet exhale escaping her. You don't get to ask that yet. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was tired. Worn in places he had never noticed before. You walked away from a version of me that begged for answers. I won't let you do that to them. Her calmness cut deeper than tears ever could. She wasn't the young woman who once waited for him to choose her over business meetings and expectations. She was someone who had built a life without him, piece by steady piece. And yet, he could see the tiny flicker of pain she was trying so hard to hide. He stepped closer. I didn't know how to stay back then. Liana's eyes lifted, filled with a softness wrapped tightly in caution. And I didn't know how to wait forever. For a moment they simply stood there, the quiet holding years of unfinished conversations between them. Adrian felt the ground shifting. His future, his wedding, his carefully crafted plans, none of it felt steady anymore. Because standing in front of him was the one person whose absence had shaped him more than her presence ever got the chance to. And he couldn't ignore the simple truth ringing inside him. If the twins were his, then every step he took next would change everything. That night, Adrian couldn't bring himself to go home. His fiancée had called twice, asking if he was still at the venue, but he kept his replies short. He wasn't ready to explain why his voice trembled or why his thoughts felt tangled beyond repair. Instead, he sat in his office, lights dim, replaying every word, every glance, every unfinished piece of his past that had suddenly returned wearing a beige suit and carrying 2 children with her smile. He stared at an old photo tucked inside his desk drawer, one he had never been able to throw away. Liana at 21, laughing under unfinished beams of a small community center they had helped design together. She had believed in him back then more than he believed in himself. And somehow that belief terrified him enough to push her away. A soft knock startled him. When he looked up, Liana stood at the doorway, her posture steady but her eyes carrying something uncertain. She held a small envelope in her hand. I didn't want to leave things like this, she said quietly. He nodded, unable to speak. She placed the envelope on his desk. Inside are the details about the project, the schedule, and a letter. One I wrote a long time ago. Her voice softened. I never sent it. I thought I'd never have to. He swallowed, his pulse quickening. Why bring it now? Because seeing you today reminded me that unfinished stories have a way of returning when we least expect. She hesitated, something unspoken hovering in her voice. And because the truth deserves a place to breathe even if it changes everything. Before he could stand, before he could ask more, she stepped back. Read it when you're ready, Adrian. Not before. And with that, she walked away, quiet, composed, leaving him with a letter that felt heavier than the entire future he had planned. Adrian held the envelope for a long time before opening it, tracing the edges like it might disappear if he rushed. When he finally unfolded the letter, Liana's handwriting swept across the page, gentle, steady, painfully familiar. The first line stole the breath from his lungs. I wanted you to know, even if you never asked, that love should never have to beg to stay. The letter unfolded memories he had buried. Nights she waited for him to return from meetings, mornings she left sketches on his desk hoping he would notice, quiet moments when she believed they were building a future together while he drifted further away. And then the words changed. Softer. Braver. When I found out I was expecting, I waited for you to come back. Not to fix everything. Just to care. But silence spoke louder than anything you might have said. Adrian's hands trembled. He read every line twice, feeling the truth settle like a weight he had carried unknowingly for years. She hadn't vanished. She had learned to survive without someone who never learned how to stay. The last line struck him like a heartbeat returning after years of stillness. They deserve someone who chooses them without hesitation. If that can't be you, then let this be goodbye to the version of us that never grew. Adrian pressed the letter to his forehead, breathing through the ache flooding his chest. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the choices he made back then or the opportunity he might have lost forever. But one thing became painfully, beautifully clear. He couldn't walk back into his life pretending nothing had changed. Whether the twins were his or not, whether Liana ever let him close again or kept him at a distance, he knew one truth with absolute certainty. His next step would decide the rest of his life. Just as he stood to go find her, the office door opened, and the twins peeked in, shy smiles on their faces, as if carrying the answer he feared and hoped for all at once.